Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to read an essay by Jackie Torrence titled Scary Tales. All right, and before we do that, let's go straight into the lesson plan. This is our fourth lesson for the horror genre unit. So, the objective is students will be able to analyze an essay to determine the author's viewpoint, counter argument, and elements of language that contribute to the author's style. Now, you might ask yourself, what is the author's viewpoint? So, it's basically their perspective. It's the unique combination of the ideas that they have, the values that they have, their feelings and beliefs that influence the way the writer views the world or a specific topic. Good writers pretty much anticipate that some readers may not agree with their views, and therefore they respond to the people who might disagree by presenting counter arguments. These are arguments made to oppose a view that is different from the author's. The following are a few questions you will answer to determine the author's point of view in an essay titled Scary Tales by Jackie Torrence. The topic of the essay is these are sentence starters for you to answer to basically come up with the author's viewpoint about scary stories. Second question is the opinion of the author toward the topic is that she feels this way because another reason she feels this way is, and the details that show how she feels are. Now, let's go straight into the short story. But before we do that, we're going to read about Jackie Torrance a bit. She was born in 1944, died in 2004. She spent much of her childhood on a North Carolina farm where she grew up listening to traditional stories told by her grandfather. Years later, while working as a librarian, she was asked to read stories to some young children. She agreed, and the children were instantly captivated. Before long, Torrance was invited to tell stories in local and neighboring communities. Torrance, who was later dubbed the Story Lady, went on to gain national prominence as a storyteller. So this is her view on scary stories. Setting a purpose. Think about this while you're reading. As you read, pay attention to the points the author makes about scary tales. Would most people agree with her ideas? I want you guys to think about that while you are listening to Scary Tales. Here we go.
Scary Tales, essay by Jackie Torrance. I guess I like scary tales so much because my granddaddy liked scary tales. He'd have to tell one if it killed him. He was sick a lot, but if visitors came, he'd prop himself up in an armchair and put a quilt on his lap so nobody could see his nightshirt. Then he'd put his derby hat on. He loved that derby. And somebody would say, "Mr. Jim, tell us about that time when the fire dog followed you down through the wheat field." And my grandma would say, "Hold it. Let me leave the room. Lightning's going to strike."
All right, that's an interesting line. Stop, think, and jot a few ideas about why do you think that the grandmother said that. Hold on, I think lightning is going to strike. Put this video on pause here, think about it, answer it. Let's continue.
She always said Granddaddy was the biggest liar God ever blew breath into. So she'd leave, but not me. I'd get closer to Pa, because I wanted to watch the people listening to him. There used to be an old man who came to our house named Hall. I would hear people say, "Mr. Hall wears a rug." I didn't know what a rug was. I'd lay down on the floor, and Grandma would say, "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to find Mr. Hall's rug." And Grandma would say, "Get up, get up."
All right, let's go back to the questions real quick. So, one of the questions that I asked before was, and this is part of your homework, what does the author's grandma mean in lines 8 to 9 when she says, "Hold it, let me leave the room. Lightning's going to strike." Alright, and tell us what this shows about the grandmother and grandfather relationship with one another. It's important to understand that. Okay, let's continue.
That ain't nice. Well, one day, Mr. Hall was there, and Grandpa started into one of his scary stories. There was a piece of wood burning in the fireplace, sort of sticking out, and Pa spotted it. I watched him put his tobacco way back in his mouth so he could get a good long shot. At just the right moment in the story, he threw his head forward, and that tobacco came out and hit that wood just right. It fell off on the floor, and the fire sparked up. Somebody threw a baby on the floor, men ran out, and Mr. Hall ran out too. When he passed us, Mr. Hall's scalp was as naked as the palm of my hand. Jesus have mercy! Granddaddy scared the hair right off Mr. Hall's head. Well, I went over to his chair, and there in Mr. Hall's hat was his scalp. I picked it up. "Grandma, is this Mr. Hall's rug?" Grandma said, "Put that thing down and go wash your hands." Oh, I loved those days when Grandpa told his scary stories.
All right, let's go back to the questions real quick and stop thinking jot. So this is the question we are going to answer. Describe Grandpa's actions while he told his scary story. Why did he spit into the fire? What happened as a result? And why do you think Grandpa loved telling scary stories? Okay, so go and answer these questions. These questions are going to be in the description below. And this is also in your Schoology folder as well. So let's go back to that line real quick and think about that. All right, let's continue.
So when I started telling stories in school, that's what I chose. Scary tales. I've got storytelling friends who'd rather be killed than go to junior high. But not me. I love junior high. That's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and those kids can't believe they're going to have to sit there and listen to me tell a story. So I do just what Grandpa said. If you want to get the attention of a mule who's too stubborn to listen, you take the branch off a tree and come right down across the top of his head. What is my branch? A good scary story. When I tell those kids I'm going to scare you, when I start to give them a little bit of fear, well, they're ready to listen. A lot of people have told me I really shouldn't tell children scary things. Well, children can frighten themselves without your help. When they're alone in bed, they hear things and they see things. So I just help them along. "It's dark," I say, and there's a strange voice. "Where's my hairy toe?" That's all they need. They remember the dark, and they're scared again, and that's good. Children need to be frightened. We all do. It's an emotion that was given to all of us, and it should be exercised. When you don't exercise it, you lose your sense of fear. That's why my granddaddy told me scary stories. He wanted me to know that only fools rush in where angels fear to tread. You should be a little hesitant sometimes, his stories were saying. You should think twice before you go into the woods. There just might be a hairy man, and you need to be cautious. My grandfather scared me to death.
All right, let me stop right there. Let's go back to the questions, some important questions you need to answer. All right, so you're going to reread lines 45 to 59. What is the author's view about telling children scary stories? What's her point of view? And what is one counter argument that she provides? Okay, counter arguments, remember, is the opposite of a person's point of view. So, what's her point of view? And what is one of her counter arguments that she provides? Basically, answers the question why short, scary stories would not be good for young children. Think about these two questions. Let's go back. You can put it on pause. You're reading lines 45 to 59, which begins right here, ends right there. Put it on pause right now. Okay, let's continue.
Grandma would say, "Get up on your granddaddy's lap and kiss him goodnight." I'd throw my arms around him and say, "I'm going to bed." And he'd say, "It's dark up there." And I'd say, "I know." "You know what's in the dark?" "No." "Monsters," he'd say. "What do monsters do?" "They'll drag you off the bed and put you in the keyhole," he'd say. Well, I yelled and screamed going up the stairs. My grandmother would say to me on the way up, "Would you stop crying? There's not a keyhole big enough to put you in." So I remained fat for the rest of my life. That's why no monsters have ever bothered me.
Okay, so let's go back to the questions real quick. Remember, you have to figure out what the author's views are about scary stories. So the next question you're going to answer for class today: what is the author's view about telling children scary tales? And then decide whether you agree or disagree with her ideas. Okay, so you're going to figure out what the author's view is about scary tales. Then you're going to figure out if you agree or you disagree with her ideas. Consider the following questions as you come up with an answer. How hearing scary stories might be helpful. You can make a T-chart. Okay. How hearing scary stories might be helpful, and how hearing scary stories might be harmful. So these are the questions that you're going to answer for this class. Let me go back to the text, and the questions is right here. Right up. We're not doing partner, but we're doing individual at this time. And make sure that you find specific evidence from the text to prove your point. Okay? For homework, I want you guys to answer these 5 questions. I think we did come. I think we answered one of them already. Interpret. This is an interpret question. What does the author's grandma mean? Oh, we did this one in lines 8 to 9 when she says, "Hold it, let me leave the room. Lightning's going to strike." This is a summarized question. So basically, you're going to tell what happens when Mr. Hall comes to visit. That's the guy with the rug, right? Interpret questions. What does Grandpa Jim mean when he tells his granddaughter that only fools rush in where angels fear to tread? Explain what lessons scary stories can help teach. There's a drawing conclusion question. How would you describe Torrance's viewpoint on scary tales? And there's an evaluative question. Are the author's counter-arguments effective in providing her own view? Explain why or why not. So those are all homework questions, and these are all in your Schoology folder as well at the bottom in the description. The whole lesson plan will be there. And this is your exit ticket for today. What was the most important concept you learned in class? All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, message us through Schoology.